Story 1. The Craigslist Haunt. I've never been one to trust online transactions, but moving to a new apartment left me in desperate need of furniture. My budget was tight, so I turned to Craigslist. After a few days of searching, I found a listing for a slightly used couch. The ad seemed too good to be true. Couch for sale, excellent condition. Contact Rob. The accompanying photo showed a stylish dark gray couch that seemed perfect for my living room. Eager to grab the deal, I messaged Rob and received a prompt response. He explained that he was moving out of town and needed to sell the couch quickly. We agreed to meet at his place the next evening. Arriving at the address, I found myself at a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town. The neighborhood felt unsettling, especially as the sun began to set. But excitement overrode my apprehension. Rob opened the door, revealing a tall, thin man with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. "You must be here for the couch," he said in a raspy voice. I nodded, stepping inside as he led me to the living room. The house was dark and musty, as if it hadn't been lived in for quite some time. But the couch looked even better in person, and after testing it out, I was sold. "I'll take it," I said, handing over $50. His eyes gleamed as he took the money. "Great," he replied. "I'll help you load it into your car. As we maneuvered the couch through the narrow hallway, I noticed something peculiar. The walls were plastered with newspaper clippings, all detailing local burglaries and home invasions. A chill ran down my spine. "Interesting collection you have here," I said, trying to sound casual. Rob shrugged. "I'm a bit of a crime buff. Find these stories fascinating." I forced a smile, though my instincts screamed to leave. The entire experience felt surreal, and as I drove home, the image of Rob's house lingered in my mind. A week later, I was lounging on my new couch, watching TV when a strange noise echoed from the kitchen. It sounded like footsteps. My heart raced. I lived alone and wasn't expecting anyone. Grabbing a baseball bat from my closet, I quietly made my way to the kitchen and flicked on the light. There stood Rob, rummaging through my drawers. He looked up, surprised and angry. "What are you doing here?" I shouted, gripping the bat tighter. "You made it too easy." He smirked. "I knew where you lived and that you'd be alone. I've been watching you." Fear coursed through me, but I tried to remain calm. "Get out of my house now." Rob stepped toward me, and I swung the bat, striking his arm. He cursed, lunging at me and knocking me to the ground. We struggled, but I managed to kick him off and run to my phone, locking myself in the bathroom. I called the police, shaking with terror. Rob banged on the door, trying to break in. It felt like hours, but finally, I heard sirens in the distance. The police burst in, and Rob attempted to escape, but was tackled to the ground and arrested. They later informed me that Rob was a wanted thief who sold items online to learn about his buyers and rob their homes. I was lucky to be alive, but the experience left me shaken. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I came to becoming another victim. The couch, once a source of excitement, now felt like a reminder of terror. I got rid of it, unable to look at it without feeling dread. The incident taught me a valuable lesson about trust and safety. From then on, I was more cautious about buying things online, always meeting sellers in public places, and never giving out my address. Even now, whenever I hear a strange noise at night, my mind drifts back to that terrifying encounter. It's a reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, and sometimes a great deal isn't worth the risk. Story 2. The Shadow in the Basement. The rain poured down relentlessly as I sat alone in my dimly lit living room, the glow of the TV casting flickering shadows on the walls. My husband was away on a business trip, and our kids were spending the weekend with their grandparents. The house was unusually silent, a peaceful yet eerie calmness that made me uneasy. To distract myself, I decided to make some tea. The kitchen was dimly lit, and the ticking of the clock echoed through the silence. As I boiled water and prepared my tea, I heard a strange sound coming from the window, a faint scratching noise, like something sharp scraping against the glass. My heart started to race. I tried to dismiss it as a branch tapping against the window, but deep down, I knew it was something else. I stood frozen, listening intently. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. Summoning my courage, I approached the window and pulled the curtain aside. There, standing just outside the window, was a shadowy figure. I froze in fear. The figure was tall and bulky, wearing a mask that obscured its features, making it look even more terrifying. Before I could react, the figure smashed the window with a loud crash, sending shards of glass flying everywhere. I stumbled backward, falling to the floor as the intruder climbed through the broken window into my living room. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. The intruder scanned the room with cold, calculating eyes before spotting me on the floor. He walked toward me, the glint of a knife catching the light. "Don't move," he growled, his voice deep and menacing. I nodded, too terrified to speak. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. "Where's your money?" he demanded. "I don't have much cash," I stammered, "but there's some in the drawer in the kitchen." He shoved me toward the kitchen, keeping a tight grip on my arm. I led him to the drawer where we kept emergency cash. He yanked it open and grabbed the money, stuffing it into his pocket. Then his eyes narrowed as he asked, "Where else do you keep your valuables?" "In the bedroom," I whispered. "There's some jewelry on the bedside table." He dragged me upstairs to the bedroom. I pointed to the drawer, and he rifled through it, taking all the jewelry he could find. Helplessness washed over me as he ransacked my home. I didn't know what else he would take, or if he would hurt me. All I could do was hope and pray that he would leave soon, after what felt like an eternity. He seemed satisfied with his loot. He looked at me, his expression hidden behind the mask. "Stay here," he ordered. "Don't move until I'm gone." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, heading back downstairs. I heard him moving around, opening and closing drawers, and then the sound of the front door opening. I stayed still, too afraid to follow him. Minutes passed, and the house grew silent again. I finally mustered the courage to move. I crept downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was wide open, and the intruder was gone. Quickly, I shut the door and locked it, my hands shaking. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I told the operator what had happened. They assured me that the police were on their way. When the police arrived, they asked me a lot of questions. I told them everything I could remember about the intruder. They took notes and looked around the house for evidence. I felt a little better knowing they were there, but I was still scared. A few days later, the police called me. They had caught the intruder trying to sell the jewelry he stole from my house. The relief I felt was overwhelming. They told me he had a record and had been involved in several burglaries in the area. This time, though, he wouldn't be getting away. I still feel uneasy when I'm home alone, especially at night. The memory of that terrifying night is hard to forget, but I am grateful for the police and for the fact that the intruder was caught. Now, I always make sure to double-check the locks on all the doors and windows before I go to bed and never take the safety of my home for granted. Story 3. The Basement Diary. I've always had a love for horror movies, so when a stormy night rolled in, I decided to indulge myself in one of my favorites. Rain poured outside, and the wind howled like a wolf, creating the perfect ambience for a night of fright. Home alone, I settled onto the couch with a big bowl of popcorn, ready to immerse myself in terror. The old house creaked and groaned under the assault of the wind, each sound amplified by the silence that enveloped me. As the movie played, I felt a chill, not from the film, but from the atmosphere surrounding me. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from the basement, a sound that made me pause the movie and listen intently. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then it came again, louder, more insistent. My heart skipped a beat. I was the only one home, and no one ever went into the basement. It was a dark, damp place filled with forgotten things. Mustering my courage, I decided to investigate. With a deep breath, I approached the basement door, hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The air felt colder near the door, and I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Slowly, I opened the door and flicked on the light, illuminating the wooden stairs that led down into darkness. Each step creaked under my weight as I descended, the musty smell of old wood and dust assaulting my senses. Reaching the bottom, I scanned the basement, everything appearing normal: boxes stacked against the walls, old furniture covered in sheets. Then the knock came again, this time from behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The sound seemed to emanate from a far corner of the basement, where an old wooden cabinet stood. The cabinet had always been there, but I'd never paid much attention to it before. Now it seemed to draw me in with an eerie presence. With shaky hands, I approached the cabinet. The knocking had stopped, but the air felt heavy and oppressive, as if charged with an unseen force. I reached out and touched the handle, hesitating before pulling it open. The hinges squeaked loudly, and I held my breath as I peered inside. The cabinet was empty except for an old, tattered book lying on the bottom shelf. Its leather cover was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. I picked up the book, brushing away the dust, and opened it. The handwriting was old-fashioned and difficult to read, but I could make out some of the words. It appeared to be a diary written by someone who had lived in the house long ago. As I read through the pages, a growing sense of unease settled over me. The diary spoke of strange noises and sightings in the house, much like what I had experienced. The writer described hearing knocks and whispers and feeling as though they were being watched. The last entry was particularly chilling. The knocking is getting louder. I fear something is trying to get out. Suddenly, the basement light flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I gasped, dropping the book. Fumbling for my phone, I turned on the flashlight app, the beam of light cutting through the shadows. I quickly picked up the book and decided to take it upstairs, where it was safer and brighter. As I turned to leave, the knocking resumed, this time coming from the walls around me. It was louder and more insistent, echoing in the silence. Panic surged through me, and I raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time, and slammed the basement door behind me. Leaning against the door, I tried to catch my breath. The knocking had stopped, but I could still feel the cold, eerie presence lurking below. Back in the living room, I placed the book on the coffee table and sat down, trying to calm my racing heart. I decided to call my friend Mark to tell him what had happened. Mark had a knack for calming me down and usually had a logical explanation for everything. But as I reached for my phone, the power went out completely, leaving me in pitch darkness. I sat there, feeling the darkness press in around me, the wind howling outside, rain lashing against the windows. I tried to call Mark, but my phone had no signal. I felt utterly alone, the fear creeping back in. The knocking started again, this time coming from all around the house. It was as if something was trying to get in, or perhaps trying to get out. I grabbed the old book, holding it close, feeling as if it were my only connection to whatever was happening. The knocking grew louder and more frantic, echoing through the empty house. I wanted to run, to get out, but I was frozen with fear, unable to move or think. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The house was silent, save for the sound of my own breathing. The power came back on, the lights flickering to life. I looked around, expecting to see something, but there was nothing, just the old, empty house. I never found out what caused the knocking that night. Perhaps it was my imagination, fueled by the horror movie and the creepy atmosphere. Or perhaps something had indeed been locked away in the basement for a long time. I never ventured back down there, and I returned the old book to the cabinet, hoping to forget about it. But now and then, when the house is quiet and the wind is howling outside, I hear the faint sound of knocking coming from deep within the walls. Hey there, it's Mr. Night Horror. If you enjoyed this eerie journey and want to dive deeper into the shadows with us, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with more spine-chilling tales tomorrow. Stay haunted.